Not bad.
Wow.
Hey, and there we are. Hello, everybody. Once again, we are back with Raise2Launch. We're on the 8th episode here. Tomas, you and I have been doing this for a while now. And today we have a special guest. We have Alberto Mujica, which
Close
is
enough.
a legal. Lo siento, por favor. The legal expert, part of Raise2Launch, the super group. He's master in all things legal. He comes from Scale Up Legal, which is, it may startle anybody to hear, help startups figure out how to scale up. And so I thought, and we all actually collectively thought, this would be a good time to talk about taking your startup from the EU or from Asia over to the US and what you need to think about in order to make that work. So, with that kind of framework set up, I think a good question to ask both of y'all from your perspective, your points of view, why might you want to launch in the US as opposed to just staying in the EU or Asia where you already are?
Sure. I mean, for some, I mean, sometimes this might be too evident, but first of all, it's the biggest market in the world. You know,
That's true.
there's the biggest market in the world, so everybody wants to sell here. Also, it's an extremely easy market to do business in. I have, you know, I'm an attorney and I'm a lawyer in Spain, and so I know what it takes to do business in Spain. There's a lot of requirements, capitalization requirements, including if you want to set up a corporation over there, you're talking about $50,000 or so, or euro.
Oof.
Versus here, you know, setting up shop here is super easy. It costs very little. Um, so so in it between those things, the fact that it's the largest actual customer market, how easy it is to do business in the U.S., and finally, the third reason I would list is the fact that it's the largest capital market too. So it's a great place to raise money. It's it's fairly easy, and I'll finalize my question by thanking you for having me here,
Oh, yeah, my
and
bad.
I'm so happy to be a part of Race Launch, and you guys are incredible. So, yeah,
Thanks for saying that. Really,
Thanks, Alberto.
100%. It's the size of the market, which I think is the most attractive for European companies or anyone from the planet. It is true that it's not that complicated to do business in the US. I think the big question is, which sometimes companies get wrong, when to start it, when to scale, when to come. And in my experience, most of the early stage startups, they think they're not ready. They're tiptoeing. They want to get more traction. They want to get more money until they feel that they're ready. But in reality, they are already ready. So instead of setting a revenue mind, and once you have enough money, and that's when you come to the US, I think these things can be done parallel, and that's what most successful companies were doing. That they realized that opening a market might take some preparation, legal preparation, and so on, and financial, but the go-to-market strategy takes time. Finding the people who is going to be your advisor and partner, we'll talk about that more probably in details, but finding the right ingredients takes some time. And then once you have that, you realize, oh, you should have done this sooner. And that is exactly what we wanted to kind of point out, that big market, easy to do business with, what kind of, it's usually a personal obstacle or a personal limitation that is preventing from startup owners to really come. And once they get over that, that's what my experience is. They realize, oh, I should have been here sooner.
Gotcha. I do also think, and Alberto, I'm surprised you didn't hit on this because I mean, it sounds legal to me. In some of the other very large markets, China and India, there's a very different approach to intellectual property. And I think the US is a really big market, and there's other big markets, but there's very few where also kind of the assumption is people are going to do like they are more protective just in general on intellectual property than you find in some other markets too.
right. Intellectual property right enforcement in the
There you
U.S.
go.
is second to none. It's mind you, in Europe it's very good too, but in the United States it's second to none. The rights are strong; they're heavily enforced, and especially in the world where we are, where so much is related to the brand or related to a patent or copyright. Those assets and being in a market where those assets are well protected, where they're easy to exploit. And one of the things that I was going to add to what Tomas was saying is the fact that it's also a market with great resources, well documented resources. So it becomes easy to figure things out, to enter the market, including when it comes to, you know, registering your trademark here is very easy, including if you have a trademark in a different country. You can get priority for that. You can register your trademark here and get up to a year's worth of priority from that trademark if you have it somewhere else, if it's one of the Madrid Protocol countries. But
Gotcha. Yeah. I do also, I think what Tomas mentioned, which fits into this, right? So it's a big market. We have a lot of money for investment. We are relatively easy to get into, and people are willing to try new stuff just because it's new. I think Americans are famous in a way that maybe Europeans aren't. We'll try new stuff because it's new. And in Eastern Europe, where I used to live, like try something new. No, why? It's new, can't be good. Okay, well, fair enough. Uh, but as a result of that, also because the founders living in EU or in Asia, they think the thing I have is new. It might not measure up in the US, right? I might not be ready to launch. I think a good question to ask both of you from your perspectives: how do you know when you're ready? What's the signal that you would want somebody listening to this? On our couple hundred or dozens of hundreds of people who are listening who say, hey, my startup is here, it's too early. When is too early to launch, and when is the right time to launch and bring it over to the US?
How about I start with the people input, and then Alberto, you do the legal input? Because I think, because from a people perspective, you need to realize that the neighbor's grass is always greener. Effect is working. So anything European in US is interesting. Anything American in Europe is interesting. So if you have some traction already, you're ready. So if you're able to sell in your own market, you're able to sell it in US as well. Of course, you need to localize it, find local partners to do it with. But in theory, you're ready if you're able to sell it in your own market, which might be actually more difficult because people don't really see that as a special thing. And so that's it from a people behavioral perspective. Go ahead, Alberto. From a legal perspective, probably it's a different answer.
well, I mean, the decision to launch is rarely a legal one, right? It's mostly a commercial or a business decision, right? Uh, I would say the number one indicator, and for the companies that we work with, we want to see some sort of traction, at least some revenue, right? And once there's revenue in whatever market, it's likely to, if especially if it's getting enough traction, um, and the curve is positive, coming to the U.S. will will make that curve just shoot up. So I would say yes. There's legal things like setting up an entity in the U.S. Um, uh, your trademarks, everything that has to do with taxes, intercompany agreements, subsidiaries, and so on. All of those things are extremely important. But the decision to come to the U.S. is probably one that's best left to just the business, right? The business is really what's going to determine whether a company should come to the U.S. And if they do, I think with meeting those parameters, traction, revenue, it'll all blow up here in the U.S. So
Yeah.
I think that does segue nicely into my area of interest, right? Of course, I'm the lunatic who, I mean, the name of this channel on YouTube is Launch Today, right? So when do you launch your startup in the US? Today sound pretty good to me. You can do, I mean, I talk about minimum viable sprint all the time. You can run a little $100 marketing campaigns and see anybody care. And if you see people care, well, there's a giant market ready for you. If you launch and nobody cares, okay, well, step back, try a few iterations, wait till you make it work, and then you're ready to go. For most people I talk to, SaaS startups, the ease of porting over to the US is pretty simple in terms of the product, right? You don't have a logistics chain to worry about. If you don't have a logistics chain to worry about, then having access to a giant market where, I mean, of course, there's lots of competition, but if you're good at positioning, you've got an open field ahead of you. Like that's perfect, and it's easier than saying, "Great, I launched successfully in France. I have the F of the EFIGS languages done. Now I gotta do Italian and German and Spanish and English." Right? Like, or I could just get English and get all of the US, and while I'm at it, I can pick up England and Australia for free. Okay. So
Yeah.
that's my, like, you're ready to launch as soon as you can start to see that someone wants to buy. I agree. But, all right, so the why you want to launch, access to market and money and intellectual property protections and kind of new opportunity to grow and get a hockey stick, that's cool. When, now is always good. How? How is a good question. I think one of the first
Just
things, and the
one,
reason,
and
yes,
one
sir.
more thing, because your point was so good that most companies don't realize they don't need a lot of money to start. A
Yeah.
little money to explore the market, and it's not like you need to carry over your whole, logistics over with a boat. Literally every country opening is, it doesn't matter of the size, is the same complexity. So why not open one country that has the biggest size? And I think what we are just wanting to go on your point, Trevor, that you can test the market with very small money. So you don't need to pack up everything and assume that you do everything once. Just baby steps, confirming that this is the market, this is the size. Then the moment you realize that, what are the operational steps, or even do a local fundraising in the US. So you're not using your European money to scale. So those things, as you go along, you realize it's a lot easier than opening a European country, for example. And that's what the feedback I'm always hearing. And of course, they're a different size. Sorry, back to you. Just wanted to add that.
Yeah, that's a good point. And as somebody who has opened a country in Poland and detested every moment of it, and then somebody who's opened a company in Florida where I'm from, and I'm like, well, that was easy. It took me maybe an hour. Like the difference is just startling. So I think that does ask the question, right? And why we have Alberto on the show here is to say, hey, give me for a overseas uh, startup that's looking to say, all right, you've convinced us, Tomas, Alberto, and Trevor. We want to give this a thought. We did some tests. It looks like there's some potential. What do I actually do to begin to launch in the U.S.? What's your punch list of what I want to knock out as a startup, Alberto?
Okay, before I answer that, I want to add to what you were talking about before, which is, and it, precisely the point that I was making about how easy it is to do business here. You want to open up your corporation in Spain, for example, which is actually not the worst jurisdiction in the world. You're talking about 50,000 euro. You want to open up your company here, you're talking over a few $1,000s.
Yeah.
And that's because you're not here. It's probably cheaper, faster, and more efficient to open up a company here for someone overseas than it is to open the companies that they already opened in their jurisdictions. I personal experience trying to open up, for example, and that's not exactly a target, but let's say Venezuela. It's a process that'll take more than 6 months, if and here it'll take you 6 days, to get it done. So it's a big difference. So now to answer your question, Trevor, what do you need to do to begin? What's the checklist, so to speak? The first thing is the entity. You got to have your entity here. But like I said, it's quick, it's easy, it's painless. Um, and
Well, let me ask you there, actually, because
mhm,
there's 50 states, right?
right.
And I mean, I opened my companies in Florida because that's where I'm from. But it's also like, of the places you could go, Florida's the many because there's no corporate sales tax. There's Delaware is famous. Alaska sometimes pops up because they do weird tax law stuff. Like, where do you recommend someone open and why?
That's a great question because that's a big difference, big difference between the U.S. and other jurisdictions. Um, in the U.S., there's no federal or national corporate law, as opposed to Spain, France. It's each state sets their corporate law. The reality is, Delaware became very famous. Lots of people started incorporating there. They have the best courts. They have the best corporate courts, um, the best judges, because they initially had the best corporate statutes. Then every other state thought, well, why are all the companies going there? So they started copying it, and so right now, in most of the states, it's very similar to Delaware, give or take. Every state is different, but they all mimic Delaware one way or another. But I'm in Florida. You're from Florida. Tomas, you're in California. I went to Berkeley, and what do they teach at Berkeley for corporate law? They don't teach California law. They teach Delaware law. Okay.
Interesting.
What? Because it still remains the best country to the best state to incorporate in. But if you're opening up a small business, if you're not looking to go public, to raise capital, to do private equity, you don't need to go to Delaware. You're probably better off incorporating where you're going to be working. Uh, if you're going to be looking for investors, go to Delaware. If you're not going to be looking for investors, there's different states have different advantages. Privacy, when it comes to the public records for the corporation, are better in Montana, better protections in Nevada. There's certain different advantages in different states. But if you're going to look for investors, you got to go to Delaware. I often start incorporate here because Florida is a very business friendly state, and so step one, the corporation. If you have a trademark, you want to protect that. That's because that's one of those really important factors for any business. How do you protect your traction? It's your brand is your traction, right? So your trademark. If you have a patent, did you patent it somewhere? Because you can also get it. You can bring that here and get priority. Same thing with the trademarks, copyrights. Also, the relationship that you're going to have between your founding or the country, the source country, the entity in the source country, and the U.S. company is the existing entity going to own the new entity in the U.S. or are you going to have it come up as its own independent entity? So
Do
all of
you
these things
do
are
you
things
have
that
a blanket recommendation you can make for that, or is it always too specific where you can sue something?
it ranges. These options exist because they're better. It really depends, but in general, if you're going to be looking for investors, for example, you want the Delaware entity instead of your overseas entity owning your Delaware corporation. You want it the other way around. You want the Delaware
Yeah.
entity owning the other entity because your investors are going to put their money into the Delaware entity and they want to make sure all the assets ultimately lead into the Delaware entity. So, but it depends. If you're not looking for investors, you may want to just have an independent U.S. entity. If you're going to be doing licensing of intellectual property, whether it be brands, patents, whatever it is, you might want to have intercompany agreements where you do all these things, and it might be beneficial to have the U.S. entity be owned by the foreign entity.
Gotcha.
So
So the answer is it depends. But
it depends.
if you're getting investment, you really are saying, like, if you're looking for investment, go to Delaware, have Delaware Corp own everything, because that's what your investors are just going to expect.
Exactly. Exactly. And the thing is, you don't want to spook the investors. You want to make sure that that they feel secure in the investment that they're making, and having it that structured that way will typically make them feel secure about it.
And let me ask both you gentlemen real quick, because I've worked a lot in Europe. Tomas, you've worked a lot in Europe, so have you, Alberto. European rounds are legendarily small because in Europe they don't focus on upside benefit, they focus on downside risk, and they go, there's always a chance this goes to zero, so I'll give you 100,000 euros for a Series B. And when you come to the US, do you see European companies going to the US having a Delaware Corp owned entity? Do they tend to be able to raise bigger rounds, or are the rounds still crap because they're fundamentally a European company?
I think it just quickly from a people perspective, it's logical that you grow from a small amount of money in Europe because it's a small market. So literally, when you grow in the US, you need often bigger capital because it's a bigger market. So I think anyone from Europe should just change their mindset and go with the local input of what should be the amount that I'm raising because the market is bigger, and that have a tendency to be a bigger amount. Yeah.
Okay. What do you think about that?
No, I completely agree. It's bigger here because it's a bigger market. You're willing to invest more money if there's a bigger chance that you're gonna make more money. So I I think that European companies coming to the U.S. tend to, because they're making an expansion in the U.S., they tend to raise more money if they're here when they come here than they do in their European jurisdictions. So
Well,
Gotcha.
also notice one thing, and this is very useful, maybe even for U.S. investors, that European companies learned how to scale with little money. That's often not common in US. US companies often don't know how to do that. They only know how
That's true.
to scale or grow if they have 5 million or 3 million. And then when they hear a number like 50,000, they are laughing. Well, what do you mean? Well, in Europe, companies were able to make traction with that kind of money, 80 or 100K. And so I think some investors I would like to point out that that's why they are actually looking at investing to European startups lately, and they become really popular because they realize they actually can give less money and maybe get similar amount of equity or lowering their risk basically by investing into more. So that's become very popular. It's a COVID after effect, I think.
Gotcha. The capital efficiency of European startup. That is true, in part because salaries are ridiculous in the West Coast. Sorry, Tomas. And in part because the so many American startups look at this and they go, "It's a winner take all market," and so many European startups go, "But if I just got 1%, I'd do okay." And the difference between those two mindsets is a completely different way to build a business. Both can work, right? I'm not knocking one or the other, but it is, you get, say, give me 80 grand and I can build the thing that will get me 1/10 of 1% of the market and I can slowly work my way up. It is very different than saying, give me 10 million and I'll dominate the whole thing. So I get that. But I think that gets us to the right point of, you're in the EU. So I do some work with Hypercroissance Quebec, which is they take European, like, 5 million ARR companies, help them land here in Quebec as like the baby version of the United States before they go to like English markets. They can at least land in a French market. And one of the things that they emphasize is you've got to have a sensible plan for what you're going to do when you land here, right? So uh, how do you recommend a startup that's working in overseas somewhere? And Tomas, you and I have done some work in Sturpey with this kind of nonsense, right? Uh, how do you recommend a company figure out, okay, I'm used to trying to grow with 80K or whatever, and now I'm in the US and I like 80K doesn't get you very far because the market's so big. How do I build a model? How do I build a plan? What do I do to be able to say, all right, I've got the entity, I've got a plan, now I'm ready to go?
Okay, if Albert, if you don't mind, just taking a short
yeah, please.
first. So if you think that you can grow without local partners or local input, that's going to be really hard. So I advise against that. So find local partners, find local people that can get you introduced to somebody who is in your market or active in your market, active in your industry, and able to give you that industry insights. US is big. They're gonna be an expert in your area for sure. Probably a handful of them. So I right away recommend is look for an advisory board. Look for to see how you can build an advisory board by not giving salary or anything. Just get market input and maybe come up with a fractional small amount of equity plan for that those advisors to help you. They're probably going to get you introductions, probably give you tractions. Of course, Raise2Launch is formed for similar reasons, and we have a very good many good examples where even the European company was surprised, like, oh my God, that was so easy. Of course, because we're living here for 20 years and we know several thousand people, it's easy. So it's easy
Yeah.
for us, but that is exactly why you need a local partner. If you try to muscle this on your own, you're looking at a lot of punches coming. So that's I'm not saying the punches are not going to come. I'm just saying you're gonna able to reduce that if you have the local advisors. So I think that's how I would ultimately recommend any business, even preparation to begin.
Gotcha. That does raise a good point because I see a lot of startups talking about you can use, I think it's Stripe Atlas, and it will basically set you up a Delaware corporation according to their completely templated contract. And then you just have to hope that nothing you're doing is different enough that you're going to run into trouble. And absent advisors on the legal side, on the hiring side, on marketing side, on the finance side, Kim's not here in the call, but she's here with us in spirit. But like absent these people here, when the punchers come, you go, I don't know what to do, right? And like, there may yet be a marketing thing that will come at me, and I'll go like, I've never seen that before. But I mean, I've been doing marketing for 24 years, right? There's not many. And likewise, I'm sure on the HR side and on the legal side, something comes your way and you go, oh, I know what to do. I don't have to solve this anew. I just have to make tweaks based off what I already know, and away I go. So, all right.
But I want to add a little bit
Yeah.
to that, which is the example. I've had so many cases of my clients coming to me and telling me, "Well, I went to LegalZoom. I was registering this trademark, or I created this entity, or whatever it is." Not to bash on LegalZoom. It has value for smaller businesses that may, but it's just not enough. If most of the times it's not enough if you're trying to create a business that's slightly complex or has these, they'll. I'll give you an example on trademarks. They got the very minimal rights that you can get for a particular trademark, and it, and they came to me, or another one is they came to me and yes, that trademark was available, and now you spent a whole bunch of money marketing and building this brand, and now I'm going to tell you you're getting sued and you're going to lose. I'm sorry to tell you this, but this is what's going to happen. Because they went and they just didn't know. I mean,
Yeah.
it's extremely important to have that local help because, especially, I mean, I'm an attorney here. I'm a lawyer in Spain, and still, I will get local counsel for pretty much every little thing I'm going to do where I'm not, a master addict.
Right. But
And
you also
there's
you
a
have that
reason for
network,
that.
which is part of the
Yes, of
benefit.
course, of course. Yeah.
And the same for me.
Absolutely.
I don't do video work. I mean, I do, but I'm bad. I don't do video work for real. If somebody says, "Hey, I need an event video," they'll be like, "I know 4 people, right? Let me call, see who's available today."
Right.
Like that's what you get when you get an expert. So okay. So big market. We've persuaded people to try it. They've got their corporation. Hopefully, they've talked to Alberto from Raise2Launch to make it happen. They found some local partners. Everything's going. Um, Give me some examples of like some roadblocks that you see really that you say, hey, whether you've gone to Raise2Launch, you haven't gone to Raise2Launch, you did LegalZoom, right? You mentioned the trademarks thing. Give me another example of something where having that little expert is going to really help smooth out some of the speed bumps and help a corporation advance through their first. I mean, I don't know. There's tax season, right? Your first year, whatever, your first lawsuit. Because one of the benefits to America is it's easy to file a lawsuit, and one of the downsides to America is it's easy to get sued.
That's right. That's
So,
absolutely right. Since we're talking about lawsuits, I'll jump in before Tomas. But
yeah, please.
I would say, and the fact that you can get sued here means you can enforce well. You can the good thing and the bad thing is that you can sue easily, but you can also get sued easily. And I'm trying to remember the first part of your question was
just like what are sort of speed bumps that having a local expert, well, you'll be able to smooth out. I came up with lawsuits as an example, right?
yeah.
If you already have a lawyer, then when you get sued, you stress less.
Yeah, no, of course, that's pretty required. But here you can't sue, as a company, you can't sue without an attorney.
You can get sued without one.
Oh, absolutely. And you can't defend yourself as a corporation without an attorney either.
Yes, indeed.
So, but yeah, the example was the trademark. You really need to have someone that understands what it takes to protect you, and that if you go through, I'll give you something unrelated to that, just so I can give you another example, right? This client of ours, they hired a CTO. The CTO was built their app. They started getting traction. And suddenly the CTO is like, no. That belongs to me.
Oh.
I'm walking away with this unless you pay me blah, blah, blah. Well, they tried to negotiate. It became a big issue. Had they set up the employment or the partnership agreement or whatever it was, none of that would have happened because all of the intellectual property would have been assigned to the corporation. Yeah. And you would have had to just keep equity, not keeping the intellectual property. And that's an example of something that most founders don't think about. Well, yeah, I'm putting this into the company. But wait a minute. You have to actually make an assignment. The company has to actually own these things that you're building so that you don't get stuck with something like this. That's one example of a speed bump that you would avoid.
I think a lot of people forget when they're at the beginning stages. Like, hey, we're all friends here, right? Yes. But then when a capital event happens and someone sees the difference between 1 million and 5 million is how good they can screw over the rest of the team, you'd be surprised how the knives come out.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's a saying that business partners or owners have a tendency to fight about two things: when they don't have money and when they do. That's a principle of the argument. But of course, it's good that this example came out, because I think you when you start finding co-founders, you want a level of trust and so on. And this paperwork and all the things that you agree on should have a formal agreement. And by the way, that CTO, maybe I'm wrong, but if they would have at least paid partially with a little bit of money transaction for the time and material agreement, then that money transaction justifies that they own the intellectual property. I could be wrong, but this is what I've seen some startups doing, and I often advise them that it's not just equity. Make sure there is like a little bit of a money transaction, so you can say that whatever was created is actually you paid for, and it's yours. So anyway, just one more thing I wanted to say.
That's a bit like sending yourself a self-addressed stamped envelope to establish copyright. I mean,
Is it not
Yeah,
still the practice, right, Alberto? Now that we're here, that you actually end up paying. If they would have paid that CTO a little bit of money, then they would have a case to keep the product, right?
it depends. Right? I don't want to keep answering that, but
we may have lost Alberto.
Maybe the Florida internet
client
has
and
it. Anyway, go now. We can hear you, Alberto. Would you
yeah.
mind saying it?
Yeah, you dropped for a second. Sorry, dude.
Oh, okay. So, well, the bottom line is it depends, but for sure afterwards, we wrote their agreements, including intellectual property assignments and all of that. But
Yeah.
it's important to have that knowledge ahead to avoid these. You don't even they don't even become something that you worry about
Yeah.
if all of this is taken care of ahead of time.
Or if the CTO changes all the password to your Amazon buckets and says this is mine now, you can say, well, that's actual theft, and then we can resolve this quickly. Because now the
Right.
legal enforcement can come in and you can say you didn't get to do that.
Yeah.
Right, which does that perfect circle into intellectual property enforcement is wonderful in the U.S.
There we go.
Yeah,
Exactly. So just one thing on that. That's why I always advise to everyone: if you're working with someone without agreement, that is just a really bad thing. So
Yeah,
it
no
doesn't mean
agreement is lunacy.
it doesn't mean how long you know each other. You work on something, halfway doesn't go when it comes to equity, halfway doesn't go when it comes to agreements. So just work out this paperwork and just want to close this out by wanting to say one more thing. When companies are scaling over, they think they need to hire people here full time. So they think that, I need like salaried people, $100,000 annual salary and things like that. You can always start with fractional part-time people, again with an agreement.
right.
Don't get into stuff without an agreement. But that could be applied for advisors. That could apply for salespeople. That could apply for executive team. And if you have some of these either freelance style or part time people in your somebody introduced you because of a network, and you know that their career is kind of overlapping with your business, but not in a conflict of interest way. Of course, that's what you need to find that person is already naturally working this market for whatever other reason. For them, so easy to help you on the side. And guess what? Because of the current situation economically, people feel inflation and they don't have that much money. There's a lot of people who want to take on a part-time gig. They have their career, they have their job, and that's overlapping with your market. You come at the right time, say, hey, I just want to pay you hourly, maybe just a few $100 per month with your know-how and get some traction and maybe a micro equity, that person probably will be a lot more interested. And I was surprised when I built recently advisory board for a space startup. Some people that I thought I would never able to approach were like, no, I'm actually interested. I will make time for this, even if it's just a few hours per week. And then so that becomes the win-win situation when you're in the same boat and that person looking for additional opportunities, just a little bit of a side income. You just want a fractional person to work for you. So that all just comes down to finding the right people. And guess what? For 500 million, there will be always enough experts. So
There's always somebody. I get you. Yeah, that is an excellent point. As you're looking at addressing a new market or launching an existing market with a new product, I think one of the benefits to finding those local experts. Whenever I'm tackling a particularly thorny new thing, I will find an expert and say, "Look, I'll pay you $500 for 2 hours of your time and interview." Right? Like very few people, if your cold DM is, "I'll give you $500," to go, "No, thank you." Right? Now, some lawyers might go, "No, that's 1,000, please." But generally, particularly business people, I've got a new thing. I want to pay you for your time. Okay, let's wrap. Right? That in like the intro, get people on board, find assign IP rights, find a way to get them engaged in you longer term. This can all be really good. I agree, and you can find not just the old graybeards in this call, but a bunch of other experienced operators to be able to say, hey, whatever you're struggling with right now, someone on LinkedIn's a person to help, right? You can engage them fractionally, and you can get the benefit of the 30 years that somebody else was paying for them to learn how to do what they're doing now. and then you only pay for the most seasoned experience that they've got in exchange for some fair fractional amount of their time. So awesome. All right. I think that is the majority of what I want to cover today in terms of just a quick overview. Of course, if you have deeper questions about the legal or the people side of how to scale your operation from overseas in the U.S., Raise2Launch is here to help you. Also, there's Scale Up Legal. Alberto, tell us about Scale Up.
Oh, thank you. Well, at Scale Up Legal, we're in-house counsel for startups. We help them start up, scale up, and our business model is we take our fees and we bring them down by 70%, and we take that in the form of equity. And so you end up having someone that's representing you in-house, that really gets to know you, understands your needs, helps you come to the U.S., for example, or protects you here in the U.S. in the area of contracts, all of these things, including intellectual property, etc. And you have a set fee. It's better than hiring in-house counsel, which will run some couple $100,000 a year, or paying $1,000 an hour to a big law firm. So obviously the whole idea is that with that equity we get those fees back, and most importantly we're invested in you. So we literally are rooting for you. We're pushing for you, and we want you to succeed, because that's the way that we make money. So thank you, Trevor, for giving me an opportunity to talk about Scale Up.
Awesome. Yeah. So Scale Up is part of the super group that is Raise2Launch, right? We get Scale Up. We have Thomas on the HR side. We have Kim Lane on the finance side. Me and Crowd Tamers on the marketing side. If you wish to engage with us collectively, all of us experienced old graybeards, find us at raise2launch.com, or we're on LinkedIn /in/Raise2Launch. And of course, you can contact me at crowdtamers.com, or to at scaleup.com. And Thomas, where do folks find you?
Here on LinkedIn, easy to Steve Holzer. And I'm really glad to be here, and I look forward to the next session as well, right?
Excellent. All right. Well, gentlemen, thank you as always for the time. Tomas, I'll see you in 2 weeks. And Alberto, you and I are doing a show separately in a couple of weeks too. I will be launching that and announcing that on my channel sometime this week. And thanks to everybody who's watching. We'll see you around next time. Peace out.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Cheers. Have a good week.